Now, I'm actually going to make a sample character here, and I'm going to kind of create it with you, and we'll go through it step by step. And you can follow this pretty much for anything. What choices I make doesn't really matter. It's all the same process. You'll just be picking different things. Now, I won't go too much into the core character concept because I don't want to waste time, but I've decided to create a gnome fighter, and the rough idea was basically that they are a young, perhaps like a lesser son or daughter of a noble family who's been sent away to gather military allies to help this gnome royal family recover a sacred grove that they've lost to forces, to some sort of evil force. We're going to fill in our top box that you can see up here first. Now, we've got some basic information. It starts with the character name. Don't worry if you can't come up with one straight away. You can always fill this in later. But for now, I'm just going to call our little gnome, she's going to be called Serena. We know that she's a gnome, so we're going to put in the race section, gnome. And I've actually chosen for her to be a forest gnome, so I'm just going to put that in brackets next to gnome to remind me what sub-race we've chosen. Class-wise, I've decided to make her a fighter, so I'm going to put that in class. Now, level, we're going to start off at level 1, so I'm just going to put a little 1 there. Background is something we're going to come to a little bit later on. Same with alignment, we'll talk about those in a bit more detail later. And then under player name, I'm just going to put Mark, and then experience points, a big fat 0, as we're starting at level 1. All very simple stuff so far. Now we're going to move on to our ability scores. Now you remember we rolled our 6 numbers, or you can choose to have the standard array, which is actually what I'm going to use for this. I'm not going to use rolled stats. I'm going to use our standard array, which is we start off with a base of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. But now we actually get to choose which ability scores these match up to. And really what this comes down to is certainly thinking about the character's backstory, but also thinking about what you need to be the type of character you want to be. Now, for example, certain classes will require you to have certain ability scores. So wizards, for example, always use intelligence for their spells. Rogues gonna need a good dexterity because a lot of their skills, a lot of their attacks require them to use weapons that require dexterity. Fighters, barbarians might want lots of hit points because they're going to be in the front lines, for example. Now, you can play with that a little bit, and I'll show you an example of what I mean in a moment, but you just want to be thinking about ways that you can make sure your character is going to be good at what they want to do. Now, for our character, we've got strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma to fill out. So we need to start thinking about what we want our character to be good at. Now, I know, for an example, I want Serena to use a ranged weapon. I want her to be an archer rather than a melee fighter. So I know I'm going to need a strong dexterity, because dexterity garners ranged weapons. If I wanted to be a melee fighter and use swords and shields and that sort of things, I'd want a high strength. But I want Serena to have a high dexterity, so I'm actually going to put my 15, my highest number, into her dexterity, and then I cross 15 off my notes. Thinking about the character a little bit more, I like the idea that she's got high dexterity, so she's quick, she's nimble, she's a little bit agile. Kind of works with her being sneaky. I like the idea of her because she's kind of a lesser daughter of this royal family. She's often used to sneaking away and getting into trouble. I like that kind of concept with her. However, she is royal, she is noble, so I like the idea that she's actually had a bit of a strong upbringing. She's had a good education, so I might decide to put my 14 in her intelligence, making sure that she's very intelligent. She's learned about the world, and I'll mark my 14 off of my stats there. Thinking about it as well, I kind of like the idea that, she's quite charismatic. Being a noble, you would learn etiquette and how to conduct yourself, so it would make sense that our Serena would have a good charisma, so I'm going to give her a 13 there. And then also with wisdom, I like the idea that she kind of pays attention to things, but maybe she's not as observant as she would be. She's often used to getting into trouble. She kind of takes things as they come and deals with problems rather than thinking about them in advance, so I'm actually going to give her a wisdom of 10. Nice and average. It's not that she's bad at, spotting things, or she's not unobservant, she's just not particularly observational. She prefers to deal with things in the moment. Constitution, though, I like the idea of her being a tough little cookie. Maybe not, somebody who will win in a drinking contest, but she can take a tumble. Maybe she's used to a bit of rough housing and a bit of silly play fighting and stumbling through the woods. So I'm going to give her a constitution of 12, which leaves me with an 8. Ugh, not the best stat in the world, but I think it makes sense that she's not had to do a lot of manual labor in her life. She's not been working. She's not had to lift heavy things. She's kind of led a bit of a life of privilege, so that means that she has a lower strength, giving her a strength of 8. Now that we've put all of those ability scores into place, we need to briefly refer to our racial notes, because each race will increase certain stats by an amount. Now, for example, under the gnomes, under traits, it says ability score increase, our intelligence increases by 2. So our 14 will go up to a 16. Also, because I'm a forest gnome subtype, my dexterity score also increases by 1, also bringing it up to 16. So these will be our final stats. So we have a strength of 8, a dexterity of 16, a constitution of 12, an intelligence of 16, a wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 13. All of those scores are great in of themselves. However, each ability score number, so in this case an 8, a 16, a 12, has a relevant modifier. So these numbers actually just determine what your modifier will be. Now remember earlier on I said that the higher the number, the better you are at something, and the lower the number, the worse you are at something. Well, this is where the modifiers come into play. Now I'm going to put up a table on the screen now which actually breaks down what each score means and what its relevant modifier is. But the easiest way to remember it is that above 10, every even number increases your modifier by 1. So a 12 is a +1, a 14 is a +2, a 16 is a +3, and an 18 is a +4. Odd numbers above 10 don't actually increase your modifier. They're kind of the stopgap between them. So a 13, for example, is still only a +1. It doesn't increase to a +2 until it goes to 14. However, going below 10, the opposite is true. Odd numbers decrease your modifier by 1, and even numbers are the stopgap. So a 9, for example, is actually a -1 modifier, whereas an 8 is still -1 because it's an even number. Hopefully that makes sense, and we're actually going to record these modifiers in the little circle below our ability scores on the character sheet. So our 8 strength is a -1, our 16 dexterity is a +3, our constitution of 12 is a +1, our intelligence is a +3, our wisdom is a 10, which means it is 0, it doesn't change at all, and our charisma is a +1 because it's only a 13, not a 14, so it doesn't increase from 12. Once we've got these modifiers in place, this is going to factor into everything else we work out on the character sheet. Our skills, our attacks, our saving throws, our armor class, all of this stuff is derived primarily from these 6 ability scores. Once we've got our ability scores down and we've locked those in, we've got our modifiers written down as well, we're just going to finish up transferring our notes about our race to our character sheet here in the features and traits tab. So I'm going to write down here that we have dark vision and gnome cunning. Also in our sub-race as a forest gnome, we also gain something called Natural Illusionist and Speak with Small Beasts. You'll also notice under racial traits, there's a few other things that I didn't mention there. The top one is your speed. Speeds actually vary depending on the races. Most races have a speed of 30 feet. However, the smaller races, such as gnomes, halflings, and I believe dwarves as well, only have a speed of 25 feet. And I'd record this up in the speed box near the top of the character sheet. You'll also notice that you gain languages. These actually go below your ability scores. There is a box called Other Proficiencies in Languages, and you write them in there. I, for example, have Common and Gnomish. We'll also possibly get to add a few languages later on when we choose our background. Once we've written down all of our racial traits and we've got our ability scores, it's now time to start recording some information from our class. Now, head to the class page in your player's handbook, and you will see under the class you want to be that it has a table which details all of the things you gain from level 1 to level 20. For me, I gained something called Fighting Style and Second Wind. We'll cover those in a bit more detail as we will go through in a second, but I just wanted to get them on the character sheet under my feats and traits as a reminder. Now, as you go through your chosen class in the player's handbook, you'll notice a large category called class features. This is where you're going to gain a lot of the information for your character sheet from. The first one is hit points. Now, these are worked out differently for each class. Each class gets a different hit dice type. A hit dice is the type of dice you use to determine your hit points. You gain 1 hit dice for every level you have, and these are also used later for things like healing during a rest period, a short rest, gaining them back when you take a long rest, etc, etc. For my example, a fighter has a D10 as their hit dice, so under my hit dice total box, which you can see just to the side of the skills, I'm going to write 1d10. So that reminds me that I've got 1d10 as my hit dice type. You'll also see beneath that under class features, it says hit points at first level, 10 plus my constitution modifier. My constitution modifier, whilst our score is 12, our modifier is +1, which means our hit points will be 10 plus 1, which is our modifier. So in the current hit points, under hit point maximum, I would write 11. Also lists there hit points at high levels. You gain 1d10 or 6 plus your constitution modifier per level after first. That only applies to fighters. Each different class will have a different hit dice type, so make sure you check that. Thanks for joining me for part 2, guys. Part 3 will be covering proficiencies, including saving throws and skill bonuses, as well as class features, backgrounds, and working out your skill bonuses. Thanks very much for watching so far. I hope that this series is proving useful. Don't forget to check out the playlist or watch part 1 if you haven't already. And as always, please do subscribe if you enjoy these videos. Give a little thumbs up if you found this video particularly useful. And I will see you ready for part 3 when we discuss character creation in more detail.